now to invite the panelists to come up and sit on this table up here. Sit on the chairs. Sit at the table. I can even offer you new cans of water. Well, oh dear, only a couple, so you'll have to share. The panel, I'm going to let these folks introduce themselves briefly, but the focus of this panel is on promoting end user adoption and creating a business ecosystem. And I don't really want to, we're going to try to keep those a little bit separate, but I think there's some back and forth here that it's kind of a chicken and egg thing where creating the ecosystem is going to promote adoption, and promoting adoption is going to help create the ecosystem. So I don't mind too much if we jump around. And again, much appreciate anybody on the floor is welcome to add their comments on this point as well. But let me just begin by asking you all to introduce yourselves briefly. Well, Sharul, you don't have to, but the rest of the folks here can introduce themselves briefly and explain their role in the OPAF initiative. Starting with Trevor.
Yeah, hi, my name is Trevor Cusworth. I work for Schneider Electric. I'm a strategic account manager there. But also I've been working with the OPAF forum since the foundation back in 2016. I was the co-chair until Jaco succeeded me. My focus right now is the adoption guide. We're writing and I'll talk a little bit more about it later, but it's a way we're trying to encourage industry adoption of OPAS going forwards.
Yeah, my name is Heath Hendricks. I'm the Wood Director of the OPA Center of Excellence. Our focus right now is scaling that up so we can support our end users on implementation and total lifecycle management.
Yes, hi, I'm Rob Chavez. I'm a principal engineer and solutions architect from Intel Corporation. I'm the lead systems architect for a solution that we call Edge Controls for Industrial, which is very much, I'll talk more about it today, which is very much helping in the background accelerate activities around OPA. You don't see many OPA meetings directly. I mostly work through a lot of my colleagues at Intel who are very active within OPA.
Yeah, okay, Louis.
All right, so my name is Luis Duran with ABB. I'm a Global Product Line Manager in ABB, and in the Open Process Automation Forum, I'm co-chair with the Business Working Group. So I've worked closely with Trevor on the adoption guide and been involved with the forum since 2017.
Morning, my name is Robert Tulalian. I'm the last minute addition to this panel. On behalf of Bob, Bob has to do some urgent calls, so he asked me if I can substitute. Yeah, but I am working for Shell. I'm my day job is Information Data Technology Manager for Automation Control. And my job of connections to the OPA is I am the guy that gets the hands dirty, connect all those IOs and DCNs, put it in a box, and test it. That's my job. Thank you.
So Robert Whitaker did have to leave on a urgent, he didn't have a choice, he really had to leave and apologizes for not being here. But Robert, I'm going to start asking you, based on what Jaco said, he'd said two things that I thought maybe you could expand on. One was moving existing applications from brownfield to the ACP. If you could talk a little bit about that, and the other aspect of it was your experience with the UAO runtime. So maybe you could just expand on what Jaco touched on a little bit for the folks here.
Sure. So first is the goal really is to de-risk the new technology before we put it into our brownfield assets. So what we did is we simulate the brownfield scenario, put it in our lab, and test all those function blocks, IOs, and see how this virtualized IOs or ACPs can work. Basically, that's it. The other question is the ACP runtime. So it was, the runtime is really working well in our test scenarios and test cases. One thing that we saw that needs some improvement, just like Petronas also saw, is the data broker that connects your OPC UA to another, maybe a ACP or an IO. It's not straightforward. When we try to, sorry, all my information are unfiltered. This is based on the testing.
Yeah, please speak in the
That's what I was
microphone so
talking
people
with.
can hear you.
And sadly or unfortunately, maybe it's still there. But when we tested it, it didn't really update or run continuously. So we have to do a manual updates before we can continue working on that. So,
Okay,
but it's working.
As long as it's non-competitive information, okay.
okay. Thanks very much. A question that, I have a couple of questions that I'm going to ask right away. One is to Heath. You mentioned an OPA Center of Excellence. Could you just give us a thumbnail sketch of what that is and what you're doing, what the objectives are?
Sure. So, Wood's been involved with OPA, I guess, coming up closing on 10 years, but that's been with a smaller team that was really focused on helping define the technology. We're really seeing that, there's a significant step change next couple of years around utilization and the types of situations we're rolling it out to. And we thought that because of that, there was a need to expand our offerings there and also definitely grow the number of technical experts we have in the field significantly. So last year we announced that we're opening up an OPA Center of Excellence, and we have now, that's up and running, it's open for business, and we have done a variety of things such as, we've been involved with supporting end users on their test beds, definition and setup and use. We're now working to create that on our end. We have developed a draft application library that we've done internally, but now we're reaching out to partners for feedback on. But most importantly, focusing on taking our existing SMEs in the area and growing up a lot more resources so we can support projects, but also a key role for the system integrator is post-commissioning total lifecycle support and helping to be able to provide that, but also reach out to our clients and talk about what that cost look like and some of the significant commercial advantages that we see with OPA.
Okay,
Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. The next question I'm going to throw out to Rob Chavez, and that has to do with the three-letter acronym you folks at Intel throw around a lot, Edge Control for Industrial. And could you just give us a quick sketch of that and who it's designed to target, what it does, and how you make it available?
Yeah, you bet. So, yeah, Edge Controls for Industrial, ECI, that's the three-letter acronym.
Move your microphone a little
Yep.
closer, please.
Okay. ECI, Edge Controls for Industrial. It's a software/hardware kit, and it's modular, and it's composed of it's a pretty broad, expansive set of software and hardware tools, really meant to expose the value and the features of an Intel processor, such that you can build control. The idea is you can build control systems on generic IPCs. So we're focused on solving real-time compute on an IPC at the industrial edge. We're focused on solving workload density, workload consolidation. How do you isolate your critical workloads in a mixed criticality workload environment? We're focused on security. We're focused on onboarding. We have an extensive onboarding investment when it comes to FIDO device onboarding and in technology we call bare metal onboarding. We have, this spans multiple segments too. So we have motion control applications. We've done optimizations with protocol drivers, with OPCUA and TSN. So it's a really expansive kit. And we primarily work with ISVs and we work with a lot of the DCS suppliers and OEMs. And the way we've architected is that it's modular in the sense that we can create what we call profiles. So for example, I can take a motion control app stack. I can take an optimization, and we can create really simply a stack for, say, a machine builder. Well, we can do the same thing for a DCN. And so we can get the relevant ingredients for some sort of DCN deployment, and we can create that software solution and deliver it very quickly to our customers. So, but one of the most valuable things I think we do in the ECI team is around benchmarking. And so we've learned so much from y'all about what the configurations look like, what KPIs we need to satisfy, round trip latencies, jitter, all these things that we've been talking about. And we're able to, we set this up and we prove that we can do that in this general purpose dynamic compute environment. When I say dynamic, what I mean is we're also invested in how do you extend management systems, Kubernetes and the like, such that now you can manage an application that has deterministic needs. So we have operators and extensions that help simplify that. When you talk about how to get it, we've made quite a few investments on that developer experience. And so it's pretty simple. For NDA customers, click-through license, and they can point their installation to a repo, and with a few simple commands, they can either pull a specific package from this ECI repo, or they can grab a stack, like what I mentioned, a profile.
Okay, thank you. And so primarily targeting independent software vendors and equipment OEMs.
Yes.
And giving them a jump start.
Yeah, we work directly with end users so they can kind of sample and see the art of the possible, right? But at the end of the day, we're going to work through other partners to bring this thing to life.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm going to flip back to Trevor. Could you give us kind of an overview, Trevor, of the activities that are going on, even though you're no longer co-chair, to talk about what OPAF is doing to promote adoption by both suppliers and end users? Just an overview of the activities.
Yeah, we realized early on as a forum that in order to make it successful and to get the pickup by the end users, we had to advocate for these new systems and what the benefits would be. And so we've started building what we call an adoption guide, which is really looking at how do I buy and deploy an OPAS system, depending on the type of role I have in the ecosystem. So we started out with the end user role. And it's basically a Q&A document. That's, we try to come up with the questions we believe end users would have, around awareness, around readiness, around deployment, support, service. And we built a document around that. And right now it's a document, but the intent ultimately is for it to be a web-based solution so that if there are new questions that come, we'll have our experts in the background being able to answer those questions and keep this Q&A document current. So we're just about to publish the end user guide. We're now focusing on the system integrator role, and then we'll do the service provider, and then we'll do the hardware and software suppliers. So it's really, depending on where you come from, the questions that you might have should be answered in that guide.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Luis. Yeah.
Yeah, so in case you're not aware, so we published a business guide that also Trevor helped revise and update, so his contributions are very valuable. But in that business guide, the first thing we did is, as Trevor said, emphasize the benefits for a more diverse ecosystem of participants. And basically, obviously, we have the end users. We normally will interact with the end users as automation suppliers. But within the automation supply, we also recognize a more diverse set of participants, such as system integrators, service providers, suppliers, and we are building on those definitions that we introduced in the business guide in order to now tackling each of these participants in the ecosystem and how they will how to facilitate their adoption of the OPAS standard. So as Trevor said, we are starting with the end user and moving on to the system integrator. So for that, I think it's because we see that those are the two key roles to drive this forward and infuse more energy into the adoption of the standard.
Okay, one thing nobody's mentioned, and I'm going to just throw this out to see who at the panel or in the room can address it. I know during COVID, the forum did some interoperability events, and they ended up being more virtual events, if you will, with I wonder if somebody can talk about that experience and where that's going in the future, because that's kind of something I think from the end user perspective, maybe people aren't as aware of. So,
I mean,
Luis,
step
you want
up
to
and
talk
try
about
to
it?
talk about it.
Yeah.
And so I think that we recognize in the forum that if we want an open, secure, interoperable system, we need to demonstrate it in the lab before we can ask the end users to really take it and put it in a live plan. Obviously, the end users are doing the test beds and are exercising that. I mean, as we saw in the presentations both from Shell and Petronas. So, but early on, we did an interoperability exercise before COVID. Then we had done one more soft-based exercise. And although we don't have a date for another interoperability event yet decided, it is clear for the forum participants that that is going to be a need that we need to address, and that's going to be a part of the continuous plan. And I think that from all the angles in the forum, either the technology working group, the subcommittee that is involved with the planning of the interoperability events, from the supplier community, and the certification working group as well, I think that we all see that the importance and the value of doing those. But honestly, we haven't yet planned when the next one is going to be.
Go ahead, Sharul.
From Petronas, our test bed is quite flexible. We have, in the architecture, we have what we call future DCN. Okay, the interoperability is we need to understand the scope of interoperability. A DCN have 5 configurations, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. For example, Don mentioned about DCN compute I/O, DCN compute gateway, etc. So when we purchase the test bed, ASRock is DCN compute. Style is DCN compute I/O, DCN I/O, and Phoenix is DCN compute I/O, and Yokogawa is DCN I/O. So we need to have additional DCN with the same type of configuration in order to do interoperability tests. So we are not sure whether compute and DCN I/O can interoperate. I'm not sure. I don't think so. So in our test bed, we actually inviting, for example, Intel. Intel has a DCN compute. So we will interoperable check with ASRock because the ASRock is DCN compute. And we are going to, for example, invite, Rockwell. Rockwell is actually has offered their product DCN compute I/O, DCN I/O, to interchange operability with their Yokogawa and I/O or style or also style DCN I/O. But the tricky part now we found is that the real time is also different. Okay? So this additional knowledge discovery, for example, Rockwell has a real time 61131, and Yokogawa now is 6149. So will that be interoperable? I don't think so. So this kind of discovery is very important learning point that we bump into, right? Okay, thank you.
Trevor, you had a comment?
Yeah, I'm just going to expand upon what Lewis was saying. Since we've just released 2.1 final, which is really the first version of the standard that suppliers can build to, we were thinking of holding off on an IOP until we start seeing some products coming out of that. So there probably won't be one coming up very soon.
Okay, let me ask a question about that's off script. When you talk about, we've talked about that as being an event. What is preventing something like that from, instead of being an event, being a resource that's more or less ongoing and maybe shared or scheduled or managed, that would get new participants or new entrants to be able to do that? I'm thinking that the initial plans for these were them to be physical events. They ended up being more virtual events. What's the barrier to making that a resource that participants and maybe new participants could use in an ongoing basis for this kind of work?
Well, we might have numerous opinions. Do you want me to
Well, no,
express my
it's-
opinions?
Yeah.
Paul raised his hand, so he might have a
Yeah,
very
okay,
strong
yeah,
opinion.
'cause
Susan,
he's probably doing the work, but go
from
ahead.
my point of view, it's all a matter of resource planning. But I would like Susan Harper from the Open Group, that is our certification authority, or Paul Hunker, that has been leading the effort in interoperability testing, to comment on that. So
Well, I would just ask if you perceive that has value, is it a resource problem? I'm just asking, why that isn't an ongoing thing rather than a once-a-year event. I mean, we're talking about accelerating.
I don't know.
Go ahead. I don't know if we have a
Can we
portable
give Paul
microphone.
Hunker a
that we-
microphone so we can all hear him?
Well, we're trying to pick you up. It's much better to have him. There he goes.
So I've been managing the interoperability events for the Open Group. I also manage them for the OPC Foundation, so it's not anything new. We've talked about having them as a virtual event, just scheduled periodically. Part of it is you use an interoperability event to test new features, new functionality, prove them out. So we haven't scheduled one currently because we just released it. We're waiting for products to come out. We don't have any 3.0 features, next rev features ready for testing either. So we haven't scheduled another one. But we have talked about making it a virtual test bed that's just always online. That requires a little more infrastructure and a little more work, and we just haven't gotten there yet. It's been discussed, and we'll work on it. Yeah, yeah.
Su-
Sorry, the test beds.
Right.
Susan, introduce yourself. Everyone
Sorry.
may not
Hi,
know
everybody.
you.
I'm Sue Harper from the Open Group. I'm the project manager and program manager for all the product certifications within the Open Group. One of the things that if we wanted, I'm a firm believer of the interoperability, and Paul has been doing it for the forum. But since we are the Open Group and we want to make sure that there's no antitrust or collusion, if we wanted to do it a continuum one, we would have to move it onto the Open Group side in our resources. And it just hasn't been a priority because we've been doing the one-offs. But it's a good idea. And like Jim has been doing a virtual one in his basement for you want to jump on, but it's limited, unfortunately, because it's software only and you have to go in through a VPN and those kinds of things. But it is something that we can discuss as a forum for sure.
Was there somebody else that had something to say from the floor? I don't want to cut anybody off. Okay. Another question. I was going to ask Heath is when the specification changes and there aren't certified products and things like that, and you're all welcome to comment on that, how does that matter to the kind of work that you're doing at this point in time?
Right, so that's going to limit there's opportunities when we can work through those and identify testing methods and requirements to meet our end users' goals and the needs. But that limits the deployment, it adds cost and schedule. But there are ways and opportunities to work through that. By getting these products certified, you make them more, reduce the cost, the schedule, and makes it more, something that clients and us would be most interested in utilizing.
Okay, follow up on that. I wonder if Luis or somebody could give for those that are not familiar with it, a thumbnail sketch, maybe Susan, you're welcome to as well, but a thumbnail sketch of what that program is going to be and when we're likely to see some of that coming. Luis, go ahead.
Yeah, let me go ahead and Susan will have comments to add, I'm sure. But let me start by saying that let me start with what it is, what we have documented, and what is when it's supposed to come live. So at least the standard, the open standard, and as Trevor said, and we announced on Tuesday, the version 2.1 of the open standard is published and available on the Open Group library. So we welcome everyone to, check it out, read, provide comments. Having just published that version 2.1, and since version 1, we had defined profiles, and these profiles is a structured way of documenting the building blocks of the open and interoperable interfaces that that are defined in the OPAF standard. Along the lines of that, each of these profiles or each of these building blocks will have let's say a matching certification requirement, which is what the certification authority will confirm that the products that the suppliers will be building have implementing these profiles, these building blocks, satisfy those requirements. Why we're doing all this? The main reason to do that is to ensure that to the industry that each of these products that had implemented these profiles satisfy the requirements and meet the criteria so they can indeed be interoperable and open in these interfaces. Now, having said all that, when is this going to be possible? We're starting, the plan is to start a certification. I mean, we have already published a certification policy and a certification guide. So let's say the foundation of what the certification will do has been already in place for some time. The profiles are defined in the OPAF standards, and the certification requirements are matching these profiles. So we are starting the certification process, the operational aspect of the certification process, now that the suppliers can build products matching the version 2.1. In the second half of this year, we believe that we'll have operational, the ability to take products from the suppliers into the certification process, and then at the end of that, we'll have certified products. The other thing that will be there once those products start to come into the market is the certification process allows or basically has also a registry of products. So it will be much easier for each of the participants to find products in the market that had met the certain profiles. So it's not kind of an individual company discovery process of what suppliers doing what type of, or implemented what type of profile, but those are going to be listed in the certification registry that will be available in the Open Group website. I don't know if that wasn't too short, but
That was okay, Susan. Do you want to add to that or not? You're okay? Another question that comes up in terms of end user or promoting end user adoption is how to get more firms into the adoption cycle and smaller firms with smaller budgets. Obviously, ExxonMobil, Petronas have a lot of resources that they can throw at this. The Coalition for Open Process Automation has talked about and delivered, maybe we would call it a test bed in a can for an order of magnitude less investment probably. But we're still talking about probably a six-figure investment for a firm to get that kind of lab in a can. Is there a way anyone sees to get the level of investment down another order of magnitude so that smaller firms and smaller system integrators, I'm thinking of like the fellow who was presenting yesterday from Brazil, a small 30-person system integrator. Can they? What can people do to? Or what can the forum do to make the technology more available to firms like that? That ABB or Schneider might want to acquire someday. Oh yeah, but please. Wait till the microphone gets there, Susan. But yeah, you're welcome to address that. This is an interactive session.
And Mr. Pacheco is in the room, so he might have an opinion on that.
Okay.
So one of the things we did, we're always thinking about cost, especially when we're talking about certification. We're talking about with labs and the verification that you have to do of your product to prove conformance and certification. We're always thinking about, and I always tell everybody, every rule, every must, every shall costs money, right? So One of the things we did, and one of the reasons we have those profiles, is that's a minimum viable product. So you can do it for as small or as big a system as you want to make it. So we're trying to make it so the onus is not on the supplier. So we always have that in mind. And the reason that we built it, and we built it based on profiles, is so that the small dogs, Joe's Bait Shop, I think is my example I use all the time, can come in and build something and contribute into the OPAS ecosystem.
Okay, there's a comment in the back from Renato, who is the gentleman I was referring to, so go ahead.
Hi, everybody. So when we talk about lowering the costs for deployment of this kind of technologies, just come to my mind that you are saying that you have like an ecosystem, but it seems to me that this ecosystem is a little bit different from what I see an ecosystem from innovation, because maybe it's missing some startups out there, and maybe these startups can come with some solutions which is much lower cost than people are used to have. And I believe this is important not only for people that doesn't have so much resource, but even for the guys with a lot of resources, because if we can do something relevant with low resources for everybody, then why we are not there? So maybe should include some startup companies and some people from academy which is researching things relevant to the open process automation. And I say this from our point of view because we are dealing with industries in Brazil with open source softwares, and we're having great results, and our clients is also satisfied with the results. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
May I add something?
Sure.
So I think that that's where the definition of these open standard interfaces is critical, right? Because what we're trying to enable a much more diverse ecosystem. So by the definition of these open interfaces, is really to enable companies of any size to implement those profiles that we have described and be able to be part of this ecosystem. So it's lowering the height of the wall and hopefully removing the wall altogether, so companies of any size and the innovators, the startups can jump in and contribute and be part of this ecosystem and accelerate the innovation as you described. So I agree.
I think,
Go ahead.
yeah, just to add in on there, probably when I was talking about edge controls for industrial, really the intention was to speed up innovation and development time. So probably an indirect way of answering your question is saying through these sort of enablement kits and these other activities that are helping to speed up OEM development, it can overall, over time, result in a reduced overall cost of development.
Okay. There's a comment, I guess, coming from David DeBerry, comment or question from David DeBerry of ExxonMobil. So go ahead, David.
I love the question and the concern. So I'm David DeBerry. I work with ExxonMobil. I'm the leader of the technical team for our OPA program. Some of that question and also some of the comments that Petronas, Sherrill, and they made, this is the truth. If you want to learn about this, you got to start using it. Most of us have not been using the tools that we're using in OPA in our existing systems. Full-blown OPC UA, full-blown software certificates, things like the 1499 runtime. These are, very similar tools that we use, but they're not the same. The open standards, knowing how to use these open standards. As Rob mentioned, we work a lot with people like Intel. We work with the vendors who are present here and the others in the room. Learning what they can do, learning from each other. We have a test bed, and we have an open offer to people. You want to know how this works and what we're doing, come see it. And then the whole goal there is, please go back to where you're working and get it out on your lab, test beds, on your desk. Try this stuff out. This technology is very powerful, but it's new and at first uncomfortable because we're not used to using it. We don't know how to troubleshoot, diagnose it. It's not what we've had for 40 years. Part of that's good. Part of that is, well, you have to learn and get better. We consider it a challenge and very entertaining, and there's a lot of power here. But, you know, work with your vendors, work with your peers, work with OPAF. We're here, you can come learn. People like Intel, I mean, there's a lot of capability here. But if you don't get started, you're going to get left behind. These are new skills, they're powerful skills. Those who get them will start moving away quickly.
Thanks for the plug, Dave.
Okay, Carl has a question here or comment.
Thank you. First, kudos to Luis that you submitted a picture of your brother on the roster. Second, I think the key word in the standardization is the standard interfaces. That's the key. Anybody can build a system by putting something together, but it's not going to be a standard. It's not going to be compatible with anybody making a product and put it together. So standard interfaces is the key of this project.
Okay, are there other questions from the floor at this point? Because I have some I'd like to ask, but I certainly don't want to bogart this dialogue. So go ahead. Please identify yourself and ask your question.
I'm Alex Sherman. I'm with Sherritt in Canada. Question on behalf of, about what can users of existing systems expect for integrating with OPA devices? Like, will there be firmware updates to ABB and Yokogawa controllers that add compatibility with OPA devices, or will we be able to add gateway devices or something like that?
You want to comment, or you want me to? Should I answer?
Yeah, that's yeah. I was going to say that exactly.
There is a vendor on the panel.
Yes, there is.
Two, actually, but
Yeah.
you want me to take it?
Yeah. I think-
All of the above.
All of the above? Okay. Thanks.
Okay, well, I know the Open Process Automation Forum has always had in the architecture the ability to, or the need, recognize the requirement that for migration. But yeah, I think that's really something that you have to go specifically with your own incumbent suppliers and ask them about their roadmap, as Alex says. And it's really just a good one-line question you can ask, and they will tell you if you're their customer. Okay, there's...
So I have a question
Sure.
probably more for the vendor side of the panel. End users, feel free to jump in for your own experiences. But,
Jump on the-
you know, we've talked about talking to your vendors and asking about roadmaps. And for the vendors who know ExxonMobil, they know we bug them to death for answers and when and show us. Are you vendors seeing, you know, including the wood, now that you have your center of excellence, are you seeing demand? Are you seeing questions? Is that picking up? You know, people who maybe aren't part of the forum asking about it, and how are they doing that? And you know, are we seeing a trend?
Who wants to touch that one?
I can comment.
I'll start. Yeah, as I mentioned, we had been involved for some time, but we're definitely seeing 23, 24 as an inflection point where the demand is picking up. We're seeing, you know, people moving from just getting familiar with it to trying to implement it either on a test bed or in some instances now on production. And I think others that are involved with that are getting more interested in that. They may not be ready to roll out, you know, a small or even more medium-sized installation, but are interested in learning about that. And I think one of the things that's helping there also is there's a lot of collaboration and work within entities, us included, to help drive that forward. And we're also, you know, putting ourselves in a position where we can address some of those, you know, potential new clients to help with that. You mentioned Seaplane and by C. Bob's here. You know, as an example, and we've been working with UAO, we've been working with COPA, but we identified in December, you know, their OPA in a box solution, but we wanted to have an option available to us and for others around what's a quick introduction to the technology, and they came back within a month with a 5-day, here's some of the technical aspects, here's some of the commercial aspects, and things like that I think are going to help others that are starting to express a lot of interest in moving forward and getting on this journey.
Can I add to the answer?
Go ahead,
or
yeah.
An alternate answer, maybe.
We'll get to Bob afterwards.
Yeah, so I want to try to address a question because on one end you have the OPAF membership and the, obviously the end users represented in this panel and in the forum that are increasing their demand for product compliant to the OPAF standard. That's clear. We have also seen the people starting to basically follow Alex Johnson's recommendation to go and ask to your suppliers about the OPAS standard compliance. But we have to also realize that there is a momentum in the industry that is above and beyond what's happening with OPAF and the OPAS standard. We see it in, we have numerous initiatives towards open, interoperable, and secure systems. We have the OPAF that we're familiar with and we're talking about, but we also have the Namur open architecture. We have modular packages. We have, and just to mention a couple of the other initiatives. So are we seeing an increase in the demand for open, interoperable, secure systems in the vision of OPAF? Yes, but sometimes they're not expressed only as compliance to the OPAF standard. We see that also as, can you fulfill the requirements as expressed by these other type of industry initiatives? And the answer to that is yes, but not always as the OPAF standard compliance.
Okay, there was I don't know where our microphone went, but this gentleman up here had a comment or a question. It's Bob. I'll introduce you. It's Bob Hagenow from Seaplane.ai.
So I wanted to address a couple of comments. One is, how do companies that want to get started but don't have the resources of ExxonMobil or Petronas get started? And so one of our goals last year when we created the COPA Quick Start, which is the OPA pilot in the box, was to reduce that cost so that anyone could get started with this without having to pay the resources. This year we've further lowered that bar to where we're actually offering workshops where you'll get hands-on labs and have the opportunity to see demonstrations of high availability and variety of the OPA quality attributes in action and see how that works, start to learn about that, figure out how that's going to fit into your strategy, figure out how that's going to fit into your skill set that you're going to need. And it's a 1 week workshop, so it's there's only so much you can fit into 1 week, but we're going to follow that with a 3-day workshop where we'll actually walk through a design of an OPA system with you, whether that's an OPA system you want to consider or one of our off-the-shelf examples. So you can put that experience into action. We're partnering with Phoenix Contact on that and Wood. So we'll be doing that at the Phoenix Contact Customer Center in Houston, where they have an open process automation system built by COPA. And so you'll have the opportunity to do hands-on labs and things like that. Let me say one other thing also about the comment around startups. I totally agree that there is a need in this industry to move things forward more quickly if there are DCS independent vendors that are involved. Some of those are large, some of those are small. So COPA is made up of small and large company, IT and OT companies that have come together to say, hey, we want to build a coalition that can move a non-DCS available system forward that is not coming from the DCS vendors. The advantage of that is that we're not encumbered by existing businesses that can be cannibalized. And therefore, there's kind of a push and a pull in all of these DCS companies trying to struggle with. There's a group that says, yes, we need to do open process automation. And there's always a group that says, yes, but what does that do to our current revenue? And it creates this conflict where they have difficulties moving forward with a truly open system. Whereas a group like COPA, a coalition of companies that are not DCS vendors, are able to come in and say, hey, we really believe in the open system. We're adopting standards. And as a matter of fact, we have a COPA laboratory that anyone can have access to if they approach us, where you can do ongoing testing. Matter of fact, we do ongoing testing with the COPA members on a weekly basis, where they're going off and developing, coming back every week, and then testing against each other to see, is it working? Is the OPCUA or GDS capabilities that we've implemented in there, is that working? So it's an open lab, so if you're interested in that as a supplier, please approach us. But one of the things I want to say is these vendors, these COPA vendors, are taking a lot of risk to step out and start to invest in OPA. But I want to encourage the end users, you guys need to step out and take some risks as well. What we're seeing is a lot of end users, they just want to deal with the trusted DCS vendors that we've already had. But if you're going to just deal with the DCS vendors you've always done business with, you're likely going to get the same thing that you've had before. You need to be able to have some courage to step out and take some chances. And we're not talking about very big chances, like a one-week workshop is not a big chance. Buying an OPA system in a box is not a big investment. But these are things that will encourage an entire ecosystem to move forward. And that's critically important. And
It will
it's also
certainly
the systems
encourage the
integrators.
incumbent suppliers to move forward if they find that
Absolutely.
their
Right.
customers talking to other folks. I
Yeah.
definitely agree. One other comment I'd like to make, Bob, just really briefly. Luis was mentioning the direction, the general direction, and I would say, if you look at the major suppliers who are not part of this ecosystem formally at present, what you see there is a very common sort of direction with OPAF. However, what Luis mentioned is, the need to have these defined standards, or it was Carl saying that, the need to have the whole system built around a set of standardized interfaces. That's not there within those other vendors, but in terms of having distributed, secure, relocatable, software-defined systems, even the vendors in the DCS market that are not here have a very common direction. So it's a question for them to get into this ecosystem. They're headed that way in terms of their overall architecture, but not yet in terms of accepting the interfaces that are defined here.
That's well said. And I was going to support your comment by saying it's not just DCS vendors where we're seeing that. It's pretty much across the industry. So whether they're automotive or discrete, or wherever they're at, machine builders, they're all headed in this. In my opinion, I've seen it accelerate over the past couple of years. This software-defined direction.
Okay.
Let me just say one last thing. Yokogawa and Schneider are doing some very good work to step forward in OPA. And I want to encourage you guys to look at that. But I think you should look at multiple options as well, especially at this early stage where things are developing. I want to encourage you to kind of look at not just the DCS vendors, but the Coalition for Open Process Automation and all the non-traditional DCS vendors that I think can bring value as well. And explore both simultaneously, because you can do some of that. So thanks.
Okay, thanks. We have a few more minutes for questions, and I hope somebody has some other ones. I don't see any hands going up. Come on, somebody's got a question here. Okay, well, I can always ask another one. So I have a big list.
Should we start asking them questions?
Yeah.
You can ask the question too.
But I think the critical question is getting more end users and suppliers into this ecosystem quickly and doing that. We talked about it, a number of different things. One question that I had that came up in this discussion briefly was, and I have to ask this of the open group, I should probably know, but as somebody who's from the open group could talk about it. I know I'm familiar with the open group policy for membership for commercial organizations, but could somebody talk about the open group policy for academics or other people like that? Is there a specific policy? Maybe that's a question I should already know the answer to, but I don't. So what are the parameters that would involve outside academic people from participating in these kind of activities? how do they participate? So I just throw that out. I don't know if anybody can answer it.
Hi, Harry. Thanks for the question. I'm Anil Ali, Director of the Open Process Automation Forum.
Oh, there you are. No,
Yeah.
there you are. Okay, great.
Right.
Okay, didn't see you.
So within OPAF, there are a number of different kind of like institutions or organization types that participate. We have for-profit, not-for-profit, academic, and the list continues, and then like single-person companies. But each of those different organization types can join, and there are like different tiers of fees associated for each, and they're organized by like the size of the organization.
Okay, so the policy, the answer that I'm really looking for is that there are already policies in place within the open group structure for I know all different sizes of firms, but also academics and nonprofits.
For
and
academic
others.
institutions, other standards development organizations, anyone. And best way to get more info is to send an email to the membership list.
Okay, I appreciate that, Anil. Thank you very much. Okay. Anything else from the floor? Okay, anything else from the panel? Oh, we got something. Here we go. It says,
Mohan Kalyanaraman, ExxonMobil. So one of the things, and I know this is, when we look around the room, we see a lot of gray hairs, right? I think following up on your question.
How dare you?
Or no hair, sorry. So, I think following up on your question, I think this is a thing that we have to engage the universities, because the academic institutions provide the next generation of talent. And to the extent that we expose them to the standards-based work that we are doing, and frankly, it's cutting-edge work that we're doing, that people will get excited to join the industry. Otherwise, we will lose this whole talent pool, which may not think of this as a career and an option for them. Anyway, that's...
okay, that's a comment. Go ahead, please, Robert.
To add to that, I'd like to also have some, open and honest and respectful discussions. And I'd like to know, why are there other major suppliers are still not subscribe to the open standards? And have we addressed their concerns? Or did we have an open dialogue, honest discussions with them? What's their concerns?
Well, they're not in the room right now, but,
No, I mean, not right now, but
yeah, they're incumbents, and certainly many of the end users in this room, including Mohan, have ample opportunities to talk to them, I think. One thing that I hate to, but there's one other point I want to make that kind of came up from what a couple other folks here said. My son-in-law was a graduate student in a STEM biomechanics program for several years, and I was amazed how little money they survive on as graduate students. And I just throw out an idea for the suppliers or end users, is that it would probably not cost very much for suppliers or end users to fund very directed kind of research, because graduate students really don't survive on what they get paid. So in terms of opportunities to get talented people interested in working on problems that you have, I would say that might be, I propose that as a way to explore that outside of your own existing R&D programs. And of course, you may not get, you're not going to get commercial products out of that, but you may get some enlightened research about what the issues are from an academic perspective. But it certainly would not cost very much in comparison to funding your own program. Okay, I'm sorry to preach here, but with anything else from the floor? Yes, Carl.
Thank you. The opportunity for learning about the system is a mechatronics degree. There are, I think, 9 colleges across the U.S. that offer mechatronics degree, which is combination of electrical, mechanical, and IT combined, and they really are hands-on people. They're the kids that play with Robot Wars and things like that, and they build these systems in school. And I know several PLC companies that donate equipment to them, and then they learn, they work on with that equipment, and when they graduate, they already familiar with what they've been working on. I think that's a excellent opportunity to start them in OPAF, learning OPAF in the mechatronics school.
Okay, and I would point out that in my conversations the other day with Alois, he was talking about getting computer science students who wanted to be able to contribute and gain their own credentials in the computer science area would be willing to work on these and bring a different area of expertise to the problems, even though they were not conversant in automation or control systems, but in software. Go ahead.
And not only in the U.S., I mean, worldwide, and I have experience with a number of universities in Europe where those programs exist, and those students contribute significantly to the research and development activities that are ongoing in companies of different sizes.
And probably at very low cost. I don't know if they get paid much more in Europe. I don't think they do.
I don't review the book, sorry.
I don't think they get paid much more. Yes, David,
So-
you have another comment?
Yeah, and a question as well. But so ExxonMobil's been doing this for 7 years. We started in the lab and started playing on the desktops and started playing with this stuff. And so just to reinforce the messages that you heard, when you start playing with this stuff, you make some mistakes. You have to learn the tools, learn the techniques. But there's a moment where the light goes off and you start realizing there's some real power here. This is a step change in capability. And so my question is to Robert and Sharul, as you've gone through your FAT and you bring in the people who haven't been part of the decision to do this, but they're starting to see the capability, have you seen any of the innovation sparks light off for people who are seeing this for the first time and maybe the experience there?
We'll throw that out to Robert first, if that's okay, because you're one of the persons who ought to be sparking, I think.
Right, that's right. So, well, we started to coordinate with other groups in the automation control within the ICE community. We call it instrumentation control and electrical, as well as our technology folks in Shell. So first off, we look at how you going to, the traditional control systems engineer to look at the virtualization. So how do you explain to them that these are virtualized now and the traditional hardware, compute together, IOs are not there anymore. So that's one. Second is how are we going to adopt the current ways of working where we have the alarm management systems, the asset management systems, inventory systems, as well as the advanced process control is one of the most important things that we have to look at. And how we're going to test it in a virtualized and unknown territories yet. So those use and test cases are being written as we speak here this week or next. And from there, we are going to test all those scenarios and produce a report. That's Yaku mentioned about part of our technology maturation process is to move from development to deploy phase. And that process includes de-risking as well as proving and putting that into a territory that is mitigated territory, basically, to deploy it in our fields.
Okay, Sharul, if you can be brief, because we're really out of time.
Okay, from the discovery, when you are bringing the IT technology to the OT space, the computing power is very, very amazing. So we are looking into extending the application of DCN into PLC. Now you can replace PLC with DCN. There's a lot of cost saving there. At the same time, for example, the metering. The metering from the custody metering, I can use the DCN because of the compute power, it have many decimal places. Because DCN currently cannot accommodate this, decimal places, but high computing power can accommodate that decimal places. That is requirement by custody transfer. There's a lot of money savings there. Okay.
Okay. Well, we are out of time. Just to let you know what goes on if you're new to the forum. The forum officially closes at noon, which was a minute ago. However, there are box lunches, I hope, out here in the lobby. And the sooner you get there, the more choice you'll have for a box lunch. And that will allow you to continue the discussion informally, either in these rooms or out in the hall, between now and the OPAF meetings and other meetings that you may be going to. Please thank this panel for their work.